We're past the point of assuming people are buying gold out of some kind of doom speculation, if we were ever even there. Maybe you're into that, but it's more likely that you're just using it as a better savings option, or you intend to. And if you're kicking around that kind of use case, the normal kind, well, I have a few tips that might help. We're going to get into a few tips for gold ownership, ways that you can save some expense, you can save some time, and you can save some frustration. Now, these are tips for anyone, but not everyone is all in on gold. In that part, it's important. Not everyone ranks it as, say, their top asset. Not everyone has incurable dragon sickness. And maybe you're coming at gold or silver as a secondary asset, one you think you'd like to roll some profits into. Maybe you're just have a little bit as a backup. Now, I'm going to cover some things that you can do to get the most out of it. So this would be one to watch, because so many videos around here are going to assume you're all in. You're looking at this as your primary thing, or maybe it's part of a hobby. Maybe you're in it for fun. And we're going to think of this only as an asset for a minute. And we're going to get you ready to go. Now, real quick, I should tell you I'm somewhere in the middle. Maybe I'm all in on gold, but not in the sense that it's my primary asset. I don't think of it as an investment. I see it as a way to lock away some wealth. So it's a little bit like a savings in a traditional money market account or CD, maybe a high yield savings account, except gold's historical performance has far outpaced other savings models. Let me show you a chart from ST Bullion. So far in 2024, gold is up 20%. If we looked back 12 months, we'd see it's up 27%. And if you let me update this chart real quick, you'd see that over the past 5 years, it's actually up 85%. So that's an annualized return of 13%. Now, CD rates have spiked with Fed rate increases lately, but we'd be lucky to get 4% on cash during that time. So if you're investing in markets, stock, equities, crypto, real estate, business, maybe you're conservative, maybe you're not. And especially if you're not, I think it makes sense to lock in some profits with gold. That's how I look at it. That's my rationale. The dollar is not gaining in value, so I want to diversify my savings. So that's the practical look at gold, the part that can help any of us without any kind of black swan use case. Now, the first bit of advice I would give to anyone looking to start buying gold as a big part of an overall strategy would be to budget for recurring purchases. But if you're simply looking at gold as a way to maybe roll profit, maybe you just want a little bit of a static backup fund, then you buy when opportunity strikes. So one-off purchases, you're not going to set up a recurring schedule here. So timing will depend more on when you have capital available. So we're just going to skip past that part and get into what to buy. The first tip is pretty straightforward. You just keep it simple, buy what you can sell. So this should be advice for everyone, but it's especially important for anyone not looking to make this a hobby. Some gold is just easier to sell. It's a simple fact, and it's also a fundamental starting point here. You should understand the asset, and you should have an exit strategy before you buy. And I can give you an overview of both of those things inside of just a few minutes. So you can buy gold in all different forms. We're going to think of this like an inverted pyramid with the most popular options at the top. So every local gold and silver dealer in the US will be happy to buy an American Gold Eagle or an American Buffalo. That's what we're looking at here. These are coins produced by the US Mint. They just happen to both be 1 ounce of pure gold. And I think they should be our starting point. If we were to drop down a little bit, you'll see a Canadian maple leaf on the desk here. There are other options. You might have a maple leaf or a Krugerrand. Those are two of the oldest government bullion coins. And in order to keep this simple for you, minimize any friction that you might have in a sale, let's just stop right there. Now, I might be hurting some feelings, but any other coin, any other metal, any other bar is going to put you at varying degrees of disadvantage. And that's when you go to negotiate price. So again, that's here in the United States. Each region is going to have its favorites. And look, we're going to have hardcore gold bugs here disputing that. They might know a dealer that they think will buy anything, and they might be right. In good times, in small sales, dealers might buy anything at all. There are good arguments for a few other options. You can have Britannias, that comes to mind, but your easiest sale will always be the 3 or 4 that I already mentioned. So no need to add legwork if you aren't in this as a hobby. Now, gold bars are going to work too. I don't recommend them as a top choice simply because you need a buyer able to authenticate them. Now, bars, they're easier to counterfeit, so that limits your buyers. Local coin shops, they can always verify them. Private buyers, hit or miss. So the upside, though, is lower premium. That's not a tip, but it's an important bit of information on how all of this works. If the spot price of gold is $2,400 when you go to buy, you might be able to pick up a bar for 2% premium. That means the price would be around $2,450. Now, a maple leaf or a Krugerrand, they might be 3% premium, total price being closer to $2,475. And then an American Gold Eagle or a Buffalo, like I just showed, they might be 5%. So total cost on that 1 ounce of gold would be $25.20. So you see there's a bit of a difference between the forms you buy. So if you're doing the math, the bars are going to seem like a better deal, and sometimes they just are. But in a sale, you can expect to get 1% more back on a maple or a Krugerrand, maybe 2%, sometimes even 3% more than the bars on an Eagle or a Buffalo. So the buy to sell spread, that's the difference between what you spent and what you can get back on all those options, is going to be pretty close. So the options that I named are still going to be some of the most reliable deals. So I'm just going to drop something in here quickly. There are hucksters out there. They're going to try to sell you slabbed and graded versions of the coins that I've just mentioned. The scam is that they might try to convince you that a slabbed version of this coin is worth more than a raw version because now it's collectible. You just don't fall for that. We're keeping things simple here, and paying more just because a seller tells us it's worth more is not simple. Premiums that I've mentioned, 5%, 3%, 2%, those should be pretty close to what you'll actually find, at least within a percent or two. If a seller is quoting you more than that, just use some caution. The other consideration here is buyer pool. Any private gold buyer in the United States is going to take an Eagle or a Buffalo, and most will take a maple leaf. That's what we're looking at here. A lot will take a Krugerrand or a Britannia, and some will take a recognizable gold bar, something like a Pamp Swiss bar. Again, we're talking about private buyers. So this is the inverted pyramid. If you're only looking to lock in some wealth, you want to keep things simple, you want to stay at the top of that pyramid. So choosing from the choices I just mentioned from the top of that pyramid, that's a tip for anyone. If you're stung by this collector bug, that advice, well, it's just not going to stick, but that doesn't mean that it's not the best advice. Those collectible coins, they require a lot more work to sell, and you just have to decide if it's worth it to you. Now, for most people, for the majority, it's not. So if you aren't doing this for fun, if you're not in it as a collector, pick one of the choices I've already mentioned, and if that doesn't seem fun to you, let me show you something fun. These are mint tubes. Fill these up. They might be worth $50,000, $25,000. So 20 Eagles fit in this tube, 20 Buffaloes in this one, and 10 Maple Leafs in this. Now you can get a storage box for gold bars, for assay cards. Mint tubes and storage boxes, they let you stack a lot of wealth in a very small space. So easy to store, easy to transport. Now if you're in this for fun, maybe you want a treasure chest, or you want an album with random designs that catch your eye, Scrooge McDuck, Homer Simpson. There are a lot of ways to store gold that might be more fun than this, but I can't come up with any that are better. So tip number 1 was just start with the basics. Tip number 2 was stick with the basics. If you want to have 3 ounces of gold, get 3 Eagles or 3 Maples. If you wander from that, well, that's cool, and 95% of my videos support that, but if you're buying as a non-enthusiast, just keep it simple. Now, these aren't rules. This is just my advice to make it easier for you. And as you can see here, I break my own rules. But I would say if you want 50 ounces of gold, you should fill a tube of 20 before even considering some other options. So maybe it's 20 Eagles, and then 10 Maples, and then 20 Buffaloes. And yeah, I get it. I just said 50 ounces, and that's a big difference. I'm not making any assumptions here. Maybe it is 3, maybe it's 200, but it won't be 3 or 200 of these. So let's talk quick about size. So far, I've been talking about 1 ounce gold coins, and $2,500 for an ounce of gold is no joke. Now, fractional coins and bars, they allow some flexibility here. Premiums increase on smaller sizes, but maybe you want a lower unit cost. Now, these quarter ounce coins, they can be a good option. The premium, though, can easily jump from 3% on a 1 ounce Britannia to 7% on a quarter ounce, 16% or more on a 10th ounce. Now, maybe you caught that I switched to Britannias here. They're a lot cheaper than Eagles in fractional size and a little bit cheaper than Maple Leaf. So you have to shop a little bit more and maybe even widen the scope of what you're looking for with fractional, or you just bite the bullet and pay more. Because of that, I don't necessarily recommend them, but I completely understand their place. And as you can see, I do have some. The last thing I'll cover here is selling. Now, I mentioned how important it is to understand an asset before jumping in. Hopefully we've covered enough of that to at least get into it. The other part is having an exit strategy, so let's cover that real quick too. So starting with local coin shops, they're usually really good about buying gold or silver, and I typically want to call ahead. I'll ask if they're buying, and then I'll ask for a quote on something like an American Gold Eagle. That gives me a sense for how much they pay. Now, I would expect at least spot price for a US Mint coin like these Eagles or Buffaloes, but I'd hope for maybe 1% or 2% over. Now, if the shop I'm talking to isn't willing to give at least spot price when I want to sell, I'll check with the next until I run out of options. If I don't have any other local options, that's when I'm going to check with the big online dealers. So SD Bullion, AppMex, JM Bullion. Somebody out there is probably wondering, what about eBay? There are a lot of ways to sell a one-off coin, but there are fewer ways to sell 10 or 20 or 50 at a time. So selling where you buy, or at least trying there first, is a pretty good rule of thumb. That's unless, of course, you bought from Costco. Now, I kind of skip past buying because you have a lot of options both in person and online. SD Bullion sponsors my channel, so I'm biased, of course, but they're great for a lot of reasons, including price. Now, I buy from them personally. I typically quote their prices. I've done that here. I also buy from local shops, though, and I think that it's good to have that kind of relationship. Now, selling to an online dealer is really easy, but you do have to ship. And honestly, I need to do quite a bit better in a sale to an online dealer to go to that effort, but I might be a lot lazier than you are. The point is simply that you can sell to local coin shops, you can sell to online dealers, and to the extent that you have a network, you can sell to private parties as well. But my recommendation is to look into your options long before you ever need to sell. You don't want to have to scramble and lose the advantage of knowing who's being fair. And really, that's it. We can call this a Gold 101 overview, or we can call it a masterclass on keeping things simple and straightforward. Now, I went 8 years with only occasional deviations from my purchases of American Gold Eagles, and I would say scaling that plan was about as simple and efficient as you can get. No distractions, no real concern for error. So if you want to buy for value, I think that's the way you do it. And we're going to call it good there, so let us know what you think. If you have advice that you'd like to add to this, be sure to drop that in the comments. Always interested to see that. And while you're there, be sure to hit the like button if you found any of this interesting. Be sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on if you want to hear more on the topic. And if you're still here, thanks again for watching. I always appreciate your time. Take care.